Hello, and thank you for being here with us today. We're adding on our fabulous writers that are with us. My name's Jody Zarambi. I'm the publisher for Launchpoint Press, and I want to welcome you here today during our live stream session with 4 fabulous writers. So just so you know, since we're going live right now, you're welcome to add comments and questions. If you're watching us live, simply type it beneath the video wherever you're watching us. So let me introduce you to our writers today. We have from Launchpoint Press, Sandra de Helen.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. And we have from Desert Palm Press, Kellie Doherty.
Hello.
And from Launchpoint Press, Jane Cuthbertson.
Good morning, everybody.
And special guest, Karen Badger.
Hey there.
Great. So today we're going to listen to some books that they have excerpts from, or in one case, a work in progress. So we're looking forward to listening to all those. I'm going to bop off all of these people except for the one who's going to start us off, which will be Jane Cuthbertson. So let me remove our other writers for now. And Jane, welcome again. Very excited to hear you read today from your work in progress. Why don't you tell us about the book and set up the scene for us?
Well, this is such a work in progress. It does not even have a title yet. It takes place in an alternate universe that, except for one tiny little thing that happened in 1987, is exactly the same as the one we inhabit today. Of course, that tiny little thing will prove to be the backbone of at least 2 romances and several other things that happen. In this scene, we don't really talk about that much, but the scene in this book takes place in spring of 2021. Diane Parker is a widow. She's lost her wife of 32 years to COVID just about 3 months before. And her wife's niece, Quinn DeRossi, has been living with them through the pandemic and off and on throughout her life. So these two are very close, and their grief at Rose's death is still very much in the forefront of their lives. But on this particular day, it was interrupted by the totally unexpected appearance of a blood niece of Diane's that she did not even know she had. This woman, Jamie Parker, had just shown up on her doorstep, but both the women in this scene are seeing the advantages of her staying for a while, and that will come up a little bit in this conversation. And here we go. Diane Parker stood on the deck outside her bedroom, gazing up at the searingly bright white orb in the sky. She took in the brilliance and its reflections in the water off of the lake below her and off the snow in the not-so-distant mountains beyond the lake. She knew she had a decision to make. "Hi, Moon," she said. She and the moon had always been good friends. One of her earliest memories was from July 20th, 1969. She was standing outside her house, looking up, looking hard, trying to spot the lunar module that had landed there earlier in the day, to see the astronauts that had taken themselves farther than any human had ever gone. Her 6-year-old self knew deep down that no one could see things that small, that far away, but still, she tried. She remembered equally vividly the events of July 1987 as well. The inexplicable disappearance of the moon, its even more inexplicable reappearance, and her part in what had happened. She and her beloved life Rose had saved the world, with a little help from 2 friends and a radio. For almost 34 years, 4 people had kept a secret humanity would kill to know. But now 4 had become 3, and all too soon would become 2. And there was no guarantee that those 2 would stick around Earth forever. Thus, Diane's dilemma: let the secret die with her or pass it on. The door from the bedroom slid open, and Diane opened her eyes. Correction, Diane closed her eyes. No matter how much she loved the person coming out to join her, it was not and would never again be the one she most wanted by her side. Quinn joined her by the railing, trying hard to be unobtrusive. For perhaps a minute they stood there, silent. Diane opened her eyes and went back to taking in the spectacular view before them. Diane's house, hers alone since December 22nd, 2020, was a 3-story McMansion, outrageously large, and it backed onto a less outrageously large lake, beyond which could be seen the extremely outrageously large Rocky Mountains, and beyond that, well, the moon. This view was a huge part of the reason she and Rose had bought the place in 2003. Diane took a deep breath and felt a gentle touch on her arm as Quinn finally spoke. "You texted me?" "I just wanted to say goodnight," Diane said. "How are you doing?" Quinn asked, as she had every day since the cancer diagnosis. "I'm fine," Diane said, as she always did. Both knew the answer was a polite lie. "Fine, fine, or Louise Penny fine?" Quinn asked, using an in-joke created by one of their favorite authors. "Both," Diane said. Quinn said, "I'm glad it's warm enough to be out here enjoying this." "Me too," Diane echoed. Their words were mundane, but both knew they needed them. Since Rose's death from COVID 3 months ago and the news about Diane's cancer, every conversation, no matter how stupid, was precious. But the words didn't all have to be trite. "I'm surprised you're not asking about Jamie," Diane said. "I was in the library with her when you texted," Quinn said. "She seems nice enough. And she did the dishes after dinner. She can't be all bad." Diane smiled. Somebody raised her right. Probably her mother. And admitted, you could listen to her read the tax code and be riveted. Quinn glanced over at her aunt. "There is that," she acknowledged with a half grin. "So you don't mind if she stays a while?" Diane asked. Quinn's grin faded. "Anything that keeps you here longer." Then, before Diane could respond or retort to that, she added, "I wish you'd reconsider chemo." Diane sighed at having to face the elephant between them. "It's too late," she said quietly. Quinn sighed. "I know I'm being selfish, but I can't lose you and Aunt Rose both." Diane turned to her niece and put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm being selfish too. But you are strong enough to survive this, and you have plenty of life left. I don't want to argue about it now. Let's enjoy this night before it gets too cold." Reluctantly, Quinn nodded, and they turned back to the railing and the vista. Diane slid an arm around her niece's waist and gently pulled her close. The day had been warm, but this was Colorado in the spring. Once the sun set, temperatures dropped quickly. Diane knew they had a few more minutes before the chill hit their bones, and they would stick it out until that happened. Right as the cold made its big play, Quinn spoke again. "Jamie has a podcast." "Does she now?" Diane said. "She certainly has the voice for it." Quinn nodded. "It's called I've Got a Secret." Diane rolled her eyes. "Please don't tell me it's true crime." "Not exactly." Quinn looked over at her aunt and smiled. "I suggested she might want to talk to you about your ultimate secret." Diane gave her niece a bit of side eye and smiled back. "Funny, I was just thinking about that." "You were?" Quinn's surprised look turned to sudden suspicion. "You're not going to bury it away forever, are you?" "Probably not," Diane said. "I always thought you and Aunt Rose were joking about saving the world, you know," Quinn said. "Every time." "What changed your mind?" Diane asked. "I grew up," Quinn said. "I became a trial lawyer and learned how to read people. And I was watching you two one day and saw that underneath the laughter there was something real." She turned and faced Diane. "Something really happened. And I hope Jamie pries it out of you." Diane looked at her. "You've given up, Ms. Expert Cross-Examiner?" Quinn turned back to the view. Maybe I'm glad to have the help. She took a deep breath. The moon is amazing tonight. Diane smiled and reached out her arm as if to take the moon in the palm of her hand. It always is, she said. And that's it.
That's a great introduction to your work in progress. And what do you call it? The moon story right now?
The moon story. That is what I've called it for 35 years.
Well, it seems like there's a lot to uncover in that book as far as the mystery that Diane has. And very interesting the way that Quinn sets her up to try and get her to the podcast with Jamie and reveal her secret. So it looks like there's a lot that will come afterward that I'd love to read.
There's a great deal. There's a lot going on in this book. It's turned into a little more than I thought, but a lot going on, and hopefully it will be something people will want to read. Yeah. And I do solve the mysteries, so
even better. We don't want to leave anyone hanging.
Oh, I hope not.
Well, thank you for that.
All right.
So next up, we are going to hear from Desert Palm Press author Kellie Doherty. You can join us here. Hi.
Hello.
And I know that you're going to read from Sun-Kissed Feathers and Severed Ties, which is part of the Broken Chronicles series. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about the book and set up the scene?
Yeah, thank you so much. So yes, like you said, I'm going to be reading from Sun-Kissed Feathers and Severed Ties. It's book 1 of the Broken Chronicles, my high fantasy series. Sun-Kissed follows a moon knight named Misty. She gets this mysterious pendant attached to her neck, and she has to deal with the deadly consequences of it. It is a quest adventure with cute companion animals, a reverse magical artifact, really fun magics, and of course, sapphic romance, friends to lovers. Just to set the scene a little bit before I dive in, Misty is currently in battle. She's defending a village from the Banished Ones, who are basically criminals in my world. Some names and terms you're going to hear throughout the snippets. Dilori is Misty's superior and also love interest. Zarius is their commanding officer. Zora is Misty's companion animal, a little Volnix, a fox-like creature you can see on the cover. And you'll also hear I use the term crafting quite a lot. That is what I call magic in my world. Okay, let's dive in. Pale white blood dripped down Misty Idleman's curved short sword as she readied herself to meet her next attacker. Ignoring the shouts of battle around her and her own frantically beating heart, Misty eyed the Banished One. The overly bright, pale blue eyes, the slight smirk on the woman's face, the confidence in her expression frightened Misty, and she hesitated, the upward slash with her sword halting for a moment. The Banished crafter snarled and leapt, knocking Misty's blade aside with her staff and sending an aching jolt through Misty's arm. The Banished One reached out to grab her neck, eyes glowing white as her fingers dug into Misty's skin. In the span of a heartbeat, many thoughts tumbled through Misty's mind. Blood crafting, moon above, not now, not yet, her eyes, her veins. Misty swept her gaze down the woman's arm, and sure enough, the Banished One's veins had brightened to white, same as her glowing eyes, the color tracing the Banished One's blood and heading right for Misty. The sight of this woman's crafting sent a spike of fear down Misty's spine. Blood crafting was meant for healing of the body and the mind and the soul, but it could also be used to suck life energy from a person. Suck the life energy from me. She latched onto the woman's arm to try to wrench her away from her neck. It didn't work. The woman's piercing gaze seemed to fill Misty's vision as her crafting washed over Misty like cold water. Misty yelled as pain shuddered through her eyes, watering from shock. Try as she might, she couldn't free herself from this woman's grasp, couldn't lift her sword to save herself, or stop what little strength she possessed from draining away. Even after seasons of training to be a moon knight, she still wasn't strong enough. Her Volnix bloodline didn't give her strength, not like the Wyvern or the Needies. The woman moved closer, so close Misty could smell the dirt, sweat, and salt clinging to her skin. Misty's watery vision skittered from the glowing in the woman's eyes and focused instead on the thin line of white blood on the woman's cheek, dripping down her near translucent skin. As Misty grew weaker, the woman's cut glowed, stitching itself up. She grabbed the back of Misty's head, twisting her fingers into Misty's long hair. Misty tried again to yank herself away, but couldn't. Fear squeezed her lungs, blurring her vision and her mind. A hand appeared on the woman's shoulder, jerking her attacker away. Misty's thoughts spun as she drew in a deep, shaky breath and swiped light brown strands of hair out of her eyes, vowing to cut it later. Dilori? Sure enough, when Misty's vision cleared, her fellow Moon Knight and superior grinned at her. The expression sent an all too familiar kick through Misty's stomach that had nothing to do with the battle at hand. Now's not the time, girl. Keep your head. Dilori's dark eyes glinted, a glint Misty knew well. Tazel, Glory, Clophis winked before spinning around, swinging her blade in a wide arc, her favorite attack. Misty recognized the thump of an arm severed from its body hitting the ground. The banished one collapsed with a harsh cry, her gray hair in disarray. White blood soaked the strips of rough cloth covering her from head to toe. She wouldn't last long, and Misty was glad for it. Sun-baked idiots. Hold the rear and keep an eye out for sun creatures, okay? We'll handle the front. Dilori's deep voice rumbled through Misty, shaking her from her fear. Dilori swept her black hair out of her eyes before slamming a gauntleted hand on Misty's shoulder armor, making a crash of metal meeting metal. A smear of white blood decorated Dilori's dark cheek, partially covering the scar there, and even her tiny horns had blood on them. If you need an extra hand, use that one. She winked again and nudged the severed limb with her foot. Misty winced at Dilori's grim joke, but not at all the same. She could feel strength flooding back through her, and with it, her courage. Rubbing her bruised neck with one hand, she motioned with her sword to the battle. Send them all to the Sunglade. With pleasure, Dilori replied, chuckling, before hefting her own blade and running to stand with the other Moon Knights. A rush of pride filled Misty at seeing her friend in her element, a fighter through and through. She had the perfect build for it, a tall wall of strength. Dilori thrust her blade into another banished one, and Misty focused on the battle once more. Deep purple light filtered through the trees as the sun continued its ascent, but the coming darkness didn't bother this group of knights. Most of them were Vagari, like Misty, and could see quite clearly even in the darkest of hours. As Misty watched, another banished one snuck out from the forest line and got past the Moon Knights in the clearing, headed to the village they were sworn to protect. Misty narrowed her eyes. The knights' companion animals were stationed in the forest behind them and might catch the runner, but some banished ones knew how to sneak past even the most vigilant of guard. If this one succeeded, he would wreak havoc in the village, as the banished ones had been doing in the past moon cycle, kidnapping, torturing, stealing, killing. It was a common lifestyle for them. People who had done something unspeakable, like murder, and had somehow gotten free of the iron cell. They tried desperately to stay alive without the comfort of guards and a roof over their heads, so they did terrible things because of it. The runner was too far away for Misty to catch, but maybe not too far away to throw at. She'd been practicing in her spare time, throwing weapons, even though her superiors didn't exactly like it. Should I try? The man was pulling further away, and a reckless sense of urgency shivered down her spine. Yes. Misty sheathed her sword and darted after the runner, pulling a dagger from her belt and throwing it at the nape of his neck. Mitzel Zarius would be so disappointed. Her commanding officer would never willingly loose a weapon from his hold. When the dagger grazed the banished one's armor and sailed past, Misty could almost hear Zarius's admonishments. Throw another. Try again. She narrowed her eyes, calling up her animal crafting, the forest turning a deep orange as her Volnix bloodline took hold. Vagari shared some of their companion animals' abilities, and in Misty's case, her Volnix bloodline brought her a keener sense of sight. Calm flowed through her, a cool sensation spreading from her core and reaching even the tips of her fingers. Her vision sharpened, focusing on the man's broad shoulders, his black-scaled armor, the bead of sweat running down the back of his hairline. She threw a second dagger, knowing that this time her aim was true. But it seemed to hit something, spiraled off, and thudded into the bark of a nearby tree. Shock rippled through her. Missed again? How? Fear raked through Misty's mind. She couldn't let another one get away. Not again. She almost called for Zora to fly ahead and dig her claws into him, distracting him and stopping his frantic dash. But then Misty remembered Zora wouldn't respond. A pang of loneliness sliced through her as cleanly as a sword. Misty needed her feathered friend, her swift and clever companion, but her little Volnix, a small, furry vulpine animal with wings and 3 tails, was being tended to after a terrible injury. Misty's heartbeat quickened, pulsing in her ears. The man turned, and she saw a cut inching itself across his cheek, brightening with a searing blue light. A small blue shield shimmered into view, protecting his back. Blue? Misty drew up short. That's why my dagger missed. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening.
That was great. Lots of action going on there. I also liked your infusion of humor too about the severed hand. Or that was cute. Cut it up a little bit, but I like that. It shows a better depth of these characters, and there's so much there that I want to dig into and find out more about, like the blue shield and what does that mean and why is that important, and yes, so I'll have to read more of that. Thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thanks.
Sure. All right, so our next reader today is going to be Sandra de Helen from Launch Point Press, and let me add her in so that we can welcome her. Hi, Helen. Sandra de Helen, sorry. Look at what I'm doing. So you're reading from Migraines and Their Remedies, which is book 6 of the Poetry for the New Millennium. Why don't you go ahead and set this up for us, give us some information about the series of poems you have, and then get to it. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Well, as you said, there's a series of books of poetry, collections of poetry it started with one about lesbian love. It's called Desire Returns for a Visit. There was a political one. There was, the last one was, before this was a cookbook for poets, but it has a lot of really good recipes in it, and also also poetry to go along. One is on humor. Lesbian humor is not an oxymoron, and it isn't. So, yeah. So anyway, this one is called Migraines and Their Remedies, and it includes remedies that, I'm a person who's had migraines since I was 35 years old, and I thought I'd heard every remedy in the book, but honestly, since then, other people have recommended some other things. So if you have migraines, Okay, I just want to, I'm going to start with reading the foreword. It's not a poem, it's an essay. Migraines made me a better poet. Poetry struck me before I was diagnosed with migraine headaches. I don't remember when I wrote my first poem. My mom and dad both wrote poems regularly, and I grew up believing it was something everyone did, as necessary to daily life as reading books. In high school, my English teacher, Mrs. Wallace, encouraged me to write more, and she showed me how to edit and polish what I wrote. Thanks to her support, I published my first poem when I was 14. I gave up writing poetry in my mid-20s, at around the time I began to have sick headaches, and 10 years before migraines began to make themselves a regular part of my life. I stopped writing poetry after a male college professor told me my poetry was no good because I didn't write like a man. I don't blame him for the headaches, but his words certainly contributed to my self-doubt. I began writing daily in my 40s. I wrote plays, short stories, but never a poem. I didn't believe I could write poetry, but I felt confident about my plays and short stories. At first, the migraines came only twice a year. Over time, they became frequent enough that I was making regular trips to the emergency room and seeing my neurologist more often than my internist. After years of preventive medication, rescue pain relief, changes in my diet, additions to my exercise routine, trying every possible migraine remedy I heard or read about, the migraines became chronic, and I was at their mercy every other day, sometimes for days at a time. And that went on for 3 years. My writing suffered even more than I did. After trying one remedy, which entailed drawing my headaches, I realized all the drawings looked almost the same. One day, I remembered the art I'm best at uses words as its medium. I began to write migraine poems. Given the frequency of the headaches, I wrote a lot of migraine poems. The accepted wisdom is if a person spends 10,000 hours practicing their craft, they will master it. If true, I am indeed a master migraineur. What is true for me is that by writing migraine poems, and even when I was incapable of writing other poetry or writing anything else at all, I was honing the craft of poetry. Unlike the drawings of my headaches, the poems became more nuanced, better at metaphor, included symbolism, had meaning beyond the experience of pain. I went from writing about the pain to describing the migraines as a stalker, a jealous lover, a heartless guardian. I wrote about headache experiences and found they reminded me of other experiences in my life. I wrote in different formats, such as haiku and zenru. Writing while under the influence of pain taught me how to block other distractions, how to hone in on making my work better, no matter what life tossed me. I had given up writing poetry after one bad experience. Years of writing while experiencing intense pain allowed me to return to the craft, to call myself a poet once again. Bad company. Every July since 1999, I get company on the 1st of July. It stays all month. It sneaks out for a day or two here and there, but never has specific plans, so I have to stay at home, waiting on it, hand and foot, as it sits on my head, pounding, squeezing, sometimes poking me in the eye, kicking me in the gut, jabbing me in the side of my head. Migraine. Sure, it lives here year-round, but not every freaking day like it does each July. One June, for instance, migraine was here only 9 days, holding me hostage. January, it kept me down for 10, March for 15, but so far this month, I've managed to free myself from its vice only a few days, and only one of them in the last 8. I can't even get out to buy groceries to feed the damn thing. It will have to order in. I hope it has its own credit card. Migraine again. Twice in 1 week, after 3 weeks without a single one. Sometimes they fall this way. Other times they like to huddle around each other like kittens suckling their mama, my brain one giant belly of teats. Today's headache sent a scout, a foot soldier with a bayonet, to repeatedly stab my liver first, to make sure I awakened and arose from my warm bed, breakfasted and planned my day before throwing everything at my head. Surprise attack. Yes, we got her, gentlemen. We are taking her down. Molten rivers sluice across my head as I fall back against my chair, my eyes unable to open against even this gray afternoon. Now that my forehead is in the grip of your tiny warriors, pulling at every tendon. I reach for my pills, unable to find them by sound, less able to read the labels than I could have, if only I had surrendered when I heard the first bugle cry, instead of bravely struggling to my writing desk to die while booting up. Here's a remedy. Use ice. Put an ice pack on your forehead, scalp, or neck to get pain relief. Experts aren't sure exactly why it works, but reducing the flow of blood might be part of it. You can also try a frozen gel pack or a washcloth that you've rinsed in cold water. Migraine haiku. One more migraineur turns her face from the sunshine, prays for quiet spring. Another remedy. Try any of the following yoga poses: cat and cow pose, seated forward fold, ragdoll, downward dog, legs up the wall, bridge pose, savasana. I don't know how many minutes I've been reading. Maybe somebody could tell me. Or just
8 minutes.
Okay.
You can do another one if you want.
Okay, I will. Okay, let's see which one. The worst. The worst part of having a migraine is not the pain, not the light sensitivity, not the way everything sounds too loud. The worst part of having a migraine is not that you can't sleep or think or concentrate. It isn't that you can't read or watch television or listen to the radio or stand to your neighbors. It isn't even that you don't feel like making your bed, getting dressed, having a shower. Nor is it that you wish your cat would get its own dinner, scoop its own box, do nothing but provide comfort. No, the worst thing about having a migraine is everyone has a cure, and they will share it with you whether or not you want to hear it. Okay, thanks for listening.
That was great. And what I really liked about this group of poems is that anyone who's suffered from a migraine understands what you're talking about. And anyone who hasn't had a migraine can get some insight as to what it feels like and the way that you can deal with it. And some of those remedies, I know, work for some and not for others. And of course, you know, they just come from other people's experiences. And I thought that was great that you were sharing all these different possible ways to alleviate the pain.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And last but not least, we get to hear from our special guest today, Karen Badger. How are you?
I'm good. I didn't realize I was special, though. But
you are. So why don't you tell us about the book you're going to read from? Set it up for us.
Okay, I'm going to read from this book here. It is, let me hold it back so you can see it. It's called Mirror Image. It is my latest release. It was released back in April. And it is a metaphysical, speculative book. I'll read you a short synopsis. 56-year-old Piper Fallon vacationed on the beautiful island of Kauai, Hawaii. Kalena Keholiani, who is age 54 and is a native of Kauai, is the manager of the resort where Piper was staying. The attraction between the two women was instant and unexpected. Both recovering from recent losses, neither one of them was actually looking for a new relationship, but the Hawaiian gods had something else in mind for them, hence the metaphysical nature of this book. In this scene, the morning after spending the night together, Piper and Kalena planned to have dinner at Kalena's house. While Kalena was working, Piper went ahead to start the meal, and with time in her hands, decided to explore Kalena's home. Piper removed the golden muffins from the oven and placed them on the cooktop to cool. Kalena came up behind her and nuzzled her neck while she removed the muffins from the pan and arranged them on a plate. "Thank you for making breakfast," she said. "You're welcome. Now sit," Piper said. "You have time to eat one or two before we need to go." Kalena popped a bite of muffin into her mouth. "Oh, wow, this is good," she said. Piper grinned. "You sound like Susan. She'd go off with all kinds of praise, and when I pointed out to her that I had made it from a box mix, she would always say, 'But you have a way of seasoning everything you cook with love.'" "That's sweet. I take it she wasn't much of a cook either," Kalena asked. "She would cook occasionally, but the kitchen was more or less my domain. I've had no one cook for me in ages, until last night, that is. Thank you for making me feel so special," Kalena said. "You are special. You're special to me." Kalena placed a tender kiss on Piper's lips. "Will you come back tonight?" she asked. "Try to keep me away," Piper challenged. Just then, the cuckoo clock on the wall chimed the half hour. "Time to go. I'll meet you in the car," Piper said. She picked up their coffee mugs, rinsed them, and placed them in the sink, then went to the bedroom to collect her bag. After dropping Kalena off from work, Piper climbed into the passenger seat and secured her seatbelt. "I'd like you to give me the house keys when we get to the resort. If I'm coming back tonight, I want to stock up on a few things." Kalena frowned. "You're not buying my groceries, Piper." "No, I'm buying our groceries," she said. Kalena continued to frown. "Look, Kay, have you forgotten our talk about autonomy? I am fully capable of buying groceries, and I won't be taken care of." "And what do you think you're doing to me? I don't like being taken care of either," Kalena said. You bought groceries last night. It's my turn. The two women locked gazes in a standoff until Kalena gave in and smiled. Did we just have our first fight? It's only a fight if someone wins. That would be me, Piper said. Kalena threw her head back and laughed. I think I've met my match. All right, Piper 1, Kalena 0, for now. Piper went directly to her room at the resort to shower and don clean clothes before heading out to run her errands. By the time she followed the GPS direction to Kalena's house, it was just afternoon. The first thing Piper did when she got to the house was to bring all the groceries in and put them away in the pantry and refrigerator. Next, she rummaged through the kitchen until she found a suitable vase to put flowers in that she had picked up in Hanalei that morning. As she went through the cupboards, Piper noted that there was no shortage of cookware and appliances stored there, including a blender, crockpot, steamer, mixer, and a food processor. I'm willing to bet these belong to her grandmother, Piper mused out loud. I'm also willing to bet she hasn't a clue about how to use any of them. Piper retrieved the crockpot and placed it on the countertop. She added a large beef roast, water, packets of seasoning, and plugged it in to cook on high for the next 6 hours. She then cooked some elbow pasta, made a roux, and assembled a small macaroni and cheese dish, which would go into the oven around 4 o'clock. Happy to see the steamer, Piper removed it from its storage shelf, added water to the base, and filled the basket with fresh broccoli. She set it aside until a half hour before she planned to have dinner. The last thing she had to do were chill the wine and set the table on the lanai. A quick glance at the clock showed it was 1:30, 4 hours before she expected Kalena to be home. With time on her hands, Piper explored. She walked around every room to study the family pictures that nearly filled every open space. There were several pictures of Kalena taken throughout her childhood and into adulthood. Several of them made her smile, and a few even elicited a laugh or two. She realized Kalena was one of her grandmother's favorites. It was also obvious that Kalena was displaying mask tendencies even at a very young age. Piper wished she had known her then. How different would her life have turned out if she had met Kalena first? After exploring every room, Piper returned to the alcove in which Kalena had set up a shrine to the deities. There were several candles and statues placed around the shrine in an orderly fashion, as well as sticks of incense and what appeared to be prayer flags and beads. Despite her Catholic upbringing, teaching her not to believe in polytheistic traditions, Piper still found them fascinating and was eager to learn more. Kalena's culture was obviously based on polytheism, and Piper felt that being open-minded to her beliefs would only bring them closer. Piper looked around the living room once more and realized that she had forgotten to bring in her overnight bag, so she went to the car to retrieve it. She brought it to the bedroom and transferred its contents to the dresser beside the bed. As she was doing so, she saw a flash of movement out of the corner of her eye from across the room. It appeared to come from the window next to the freestanding mirror in the corner. It startled her at first, but when she didn't see it a second time, she chalked it up to the afternoon sunshine playing hide and seek with the clouds that dotted the sky. Piper yawned loudly when she put the last piece of clothing away. She sat on the bed and rubbed her face. That's what you get for having crazed weasel sex half the night instead of sleeping, she said out loud. Although I have to admit, I haven't enjoyed making love that much in a very long time. Part of me thinks we've been moving too fast, she thought, but I've never felt this attracted to anyone in my life, not even to Susan. She yawned again and glanced at her watch. 2 o'clock. Maybe I'll take a quick nap. She set her phone alarm to go off at 4 p.m., and then kicked off her shoes and lay on the bed. Within moments, she was fast asleep. Piper opened her eyes to total darkness. What the hell? I only planned to sleep for 2 hours. She reached for the bedside lamp and filled the room with a soft glow. I wonder what time it is. She looked at her phone on the bedside table. It read 10:27. No way! She scurried off the bed and ran into the living room, which was also very dark. Kalena? She called out. There was no response. Kalena! Piper returned to the bedroom and grabbed her cell phone from the bedside table. She turned the flashlight on and held it high as she made her way through the unfamiliar maze of furniture until she reached the front door and found the light switches to both the living room and the outside light on the lanai. She saw 2 cars in the driveway, hers, and the other she assumed to be Kalena's. "Kalena!" she called again into the darkness. No response. "Damn it, Kalena, if you're messing with me, you're going to have one pissed off girlfriend on your hands." Still, there was no response. Piper took a tentative step onto the lanai and then walked to the far end where there was a flight of stairs that led to the ground level. There were clearly 2 cars in the driveway, but no sign of Kalena. When she reached the ground, she walked towards the back of the cars. "Kalena, are you out here? You're scaring me." As Piper got closer to Kalena's car, she sensed something was not quite right. It wasn't until she was almost a foot away from the car that she realized the entire side was damaged. "Kalena, oh my God!" She screamed and hurriedly made her way down the length of the car to the driver's door. Again, she turned her cell phone flashlight on and held it high. "No!" she screamed as the light illuminated the battered and bloodied body of Kalena slumped against the steering wheel. Piper jerked awake and sat up. She looked around frantically, trying to remember where she was. Then it all came back to her. "Kalena! Oh my God, Kalena!" She quickly rose from the bed and made her way through the living room to the front door, which she threw open. She hurried down the length of the lanai to the staircase and swiftly crossed the driveway to where the car was parked. Her car was the only one there. "Kalena? Kalena, where are you?" she shouted. She looked inside the garage and even ran all the way around the house, yet Kalena's car was nowhere to be seen. "I must be losing my mind," she said, as she slowly made her way back to the house. As she entered the living room, she heard a beeping noise coming from the bedroom. The beep became louder, and a curious glow appeared to be coming from the corner of the room, not visible from other parts of the house. She walked cautiously toward the bedroom, and as she entered, the glow abruptly stopped. The beeping noise was her cell phone. It was 4 o'clock. That's it.
Wow. What a dream.
Yes.
And you can tell there's something going on there. It's not just a bad dream. It's
yes, the mirror plays very prominently in this story. That's why it's on the cover.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, if you haven't read Karen's book yet, you definitely want to grab that. And thank you all for reading from those works. They were awesome. So glad we got a chance to listen to you and listen to the works that you have. And we have a few minutes left, so I want to ask some burning questions for you. I know you're very excited about this. Let's start with the first one. As a writer, what would you choose as your spirit animal and why? Who wants to answer that?
I'll answer it first.
All right.
So shocking, probably no anyone who knows me. No one who knows me, my spirit animal would probably be a cat, only because I do own 2 of them and they like to sleep on me, and they are definitely part of my inspiration as I write my series. The Ravenlock Woods and Cinder Forest are literally my cat's names. So, but linking it more to my writing, cats are really fun and playful and adventurous, just like my stories, but they can also be like super ferocious hunters and kill lots of random little creatures. And I also write lots of deep betrayals and fights and wars and death. And so I feel like they would be a really good spirit animal for my writing.
Excellent answer. Thank you, Kelly. Anyone else want to take a shot at that?
Sure, I'll answer.
Go ahead.
I don't know if I have a spirit animal. I haven't put a whole lot of thought into it. There's no one animal that speaks to me more than others. And I like all animals, but I'm not drawn to any one particular. However, my Chinese zodiac is monkey. Monkeys are very mischievous,
Yes.
and they're curious, and they're very, very malleable, and they like to goof around. So that kind of describes me in a lot of ways. So I would choose monkey.
Awesome. Anyone else want to answer that?
Sure, I will.
Okay, Sandra.
My spirit animal is a honeybee.
Ah.
I love bees. Honeybees are They are very busy, of course. They really love their sisters, and they sometimes they learn their good habits from their mothers. They support each other. They well, of course, and also, I mean, I really love bees in general, so I plant for the pollinators. My yard might look like a, weeds or a meadow or something, but that's because I do it for the bees. And I also like honey, so why not?
Why not? Exactly. Great choice. Jane, did you want to chime in or pass on this one?
Oh, no, I'll chime in, but first I want to say I agree completely with everything Kelly said about cats. I actually have one sleeping at my feet right now and 2 others running around the house somewhere, and they're pretty much everything that she says they are. That being said, I never thought of a cat as my spirit animal. I've always been more drawn to the fox for a couple of reasons. I've always liked foxes because they're intelligent, but they're also unobtrusive and kind of introverted, but very clever. And they just always seem to, how to put it, to know what they're about. The other reason is that my mother's maiden name was Fox, so I've always felt kind of a kindred spirit with them. So,
excellent. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for those answers, everyone. I love that you're playing the game. So my next question is, what inspired the idea for the project you read from today? How did you come up with the plot or the theme? Whatever you want to tell us.
Well, I think mine's pretty obvious.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to write about the migraines, but I just thought how important it is to also share remedies, because, that's really, if you have migraines, you're going to hear them anyway. So, and just, it was a fun way to look at it, I thought.
I agree. Yeah, it's a good way. It's a good insight, but also done in a way that others, they can see the humor involved and how you deal with constant migraines too. Anyone else want to give us an answer?
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay.
So for mine, my series is called The Broken Chronicles. And so each of the main characters are broken in some way, whether it's having broken crafting or a broken body or broken spirit, that kind of thing. And Misty has a lack of confidence in her. She's not a very good fighter. She is not confident in herself in that way. But I wanted to show throughout my story that she is actually a good fighter if she uses her skills correctly. And so I wanted to show that. I also really wanted to play with the quest, adventure, magical artifact kind of trope that we have in fantasy a lot. Usually characters go on a quest to find a magical artifact, to find that sword that's going to kill the dragon, that kind of thing. But in Misty's story, she already has the magic artifact. Like, it's literally fused to her skin. And so her quest is to try to get it off of her. And so that was just really fun to play with.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to answer that one?
Sure.
Okay.
We love Hawaii. My wife and I have been 4 times. In fact, we're going back again in March for 2 weeks. And Kauai is our favorite island. So I wanted to write a book that was set on Kauai. And speculative novels are more or less my specialty. I write in a lot of different genres, but most of my standalone novels are in speculative. And with the Hawaiian gods, that just lends itself to a story about metaphysical issues. And this book, I mean, that scene that I read, it was more of a premonition than a dream. So Hawaii, absolutely my favorite place to visit. And speculative is my favorite genre to write. And you put the two together and it's a winning combination.
Sounds like it to me.
Yeah.
Jane, did you want to give a stab at that one?
Honestly, at this point, I don't remember how I got the idea for the book. It sort of, I am one of those pantser writers where everything just kind of grows. And that's what's happened with this story. It's just one thing has built upon another, and then another thing comes in, and I throw that into. It's a little bit of a kitchen sink approach, but I think it's going to work. You know, there are elements of humor and romance, and I also find myself dealing with grief and sadness. So, yeah, but I cannot tell you what the original inspiration was.
Well, you've been working on it for a while now, haven't you? So
Parts of it, yeah, for a very long time.
right. So it kind of you just kind of, as you went along and as time passed, it might have changed a little bit from the original thought of it, and now you're in the thick of it. So
that is true. And actually, I remember back then when I first started this story, I liked the idea of writing a story where everything just seems perfectly normal and part of your everyday existence, except for one thing that's out. And in this case, you know, the moon disappears and then it comes back and nobody knows what happens. And I wrote a short story once where I had a cat that read books. He was very literate, and he would not hesitate to let his owner know that when she was messing up, and, you know, stuff like that. So just, you know, one little thing out of place, but everything else is fine. So that little bit of whimsical ridiculousness, I guess, is kind of where this thing got started. And then it just took off from there. So
great. Well, thank you. And it looks like our time's up. So I want to thank all of you for being here today, sharing your works with us. And for those watching, whether live or later on, I hope you'll check out these authors' books. And you can go to desertpalmpress.com or launchpointpress.com, or to Karen, what's your website where they can get your books?
BadgerBlissBooks.com.
There you go. So we have all of them.
Also on Amazon and at Bella Books.
Awesome. So please check out these wonderful writers, and we will have our next live stream on September 22nd, where we'll hear from several writers again. And our special guest will be Sam Liddell. So until then, I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jody.
You're
Thank
welcome.
all of you wonderful authors.
yeah, thank you, Jody.
Nice to see you all.
You're welcome.